All right, welcome back to Growth Lab Sessions. I'm Joao, CEO of Stealth White Label Marketing, and my mission is simple: to help marketing agencies grow and build sustainable businesses. Today's guest is Kurtis, head of sales at Bad Marketing and founder of Agency Closers. Kurtis is a powerhouse in agency sales, helping agencies close more, collect faster, and scale smarter. He's here to drop some serious insights on building sales teams, recruiting top closers, and creating offers that actually sell. Kurtis, welcome to the Growth Lab Sessions. Are you ready to take it to the lab?
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me, brother.
Awesome. Well, Kurtis, I'm super pumped that you're here. You have so much experience, at sales, right? I also have been following your philosophy around sales. I love the way you think. You're very consultative. You're not pushy. So you definitely have your style that you've turned into systems, and you help a lot of agencies close more deals. You also work as head of sales for Bad Marketing, but give me some background. How did it all start? Let's go back a little bit so we can learn more about you.
Absolutely. I've been kind of in the entrepreneurship space for like forever. Like a lot of us, I kind of started when I was young, cutting lawns and making side cash here and there. My family's always owned a family business in a bunch of different ways. And so I kind of grew up with that entrepreneurship spirit. And naturally, that kind of led me to find people like Tim Ferriss and read all these different books, which led to a bunch of different startup ideas. And I think I've had like 15 failed businesses. But the path that ended up leading me to the agency world was I started an e-commerce brand now almost 10 years ago, selling ridiculous sunglasses online. And it was something I was really passionate about. I did it for about 5 years. And during building this e-com brand, I hired an agency. And I hired a marketing agency that I felt was reputable. They were on a bunch of podcasts, and so I had a call with them. And so I ended up hiring this agency. And what I got out of that experience, unfortunately, was a lot of debt and a really, really bad experience from working with this team. They spent way too much money. They paid no attention to the data that I had on my back end. So they were celebrating all these new revenue wins, but in the reality is I was just burning money, wasn't profitable. And so I left that agreement just feeling like super frustrated and overwhelmed. And obviously now in like $20,000 in debt from this agency. It was not a fun situation to be in. And I kind of realized through this experience that I could do it better. And with my marketing experience from building these brands in these past companies, that I think I could do a better job. I could do a better job with the customer experience, with the overall marketing angle. And so I started my own little agency. This was about 8 years ago now. And so I started doing e-com specifically as far as like that was the niche that I was focused on, doing Facebook ads and then also helping with social media management. And then that kind of trickled into a bunch of different avenues of doing like local lead generation and social media content. And so through that journey, taking on clients and building a team, I only had a team of about 4 people. That was kind of like the biggest it got. I learned a lot about what I love about the agency space and also what I hate about the agency space. And so one of the big things that I learned was I really don't like fulfillment. That is just not something that I am passionate about. I love people. I love sales, and I love the concept of like running the business, but I don't like the day-to-day fulfillment of running ads, emails, all these different things. And so through that experience, I was kind of coming to a head where I was like, what am I going to do with this agency? And I actually watched a podcast with Eddie. And Eddie was being interviewed by, I can't remember who it was at the time. Oh, no, it was Lowe's Hustle. And I watched this interview, and Eddie made a comment about how he was looking for a closer. And he was looking for somebody to come in and take over sales for him. And so shot him a message out of the blue, didn't know who this guy was, which kind of led me into the whole Bad Marketing world, and had a meeting with Eddie, and he hired me. And here we are almost 5 years later. So that's kind of my whole path that kind of led me here through a bunch of unfortunate situations, but a ton of amazing learning experiences.
Awesome. And so what was your message to Eddie?
Well,
Because
my message to Eddie,
to hear about that one.
Yeah, I was really simple. I reached out over email, and I think I actually filled out an application on the website as well. I just said that I had e-commerce experience, sent them my business, and that I'd love to interview. the interview is something that I put a lot of time into with Eddie. Eddie's a huge fan of like White Monster. And at the time, there was a lot of talk about like Alex Hormozy and all these different things. So I kind of set up my 1 minute video that I sent him with like me with a White Monster in my hand, with like a Hormozy book behind me. And like I played all these different aspects and managed to get his attention. And the interview was pretty straightforward. It was actually funny looking back at it. It was such an informal interview. Eddie hopped on, asked me 2 questions and was like, I like how you carry yourself. And I know I can work with you. So like the job's yours if you want it. And that was basically it. And kind of here we are off to the races. And I think he made a good judgment call. But yeah, that was kind of how the whole thing kind of panned out.
Yeah, he definitely did. You're awesome. And every, encounter with you is super cool. You're always, adding so much value to me and, everybody that like every time that I see you in events, I see people loving you and hugging you and like, shouting your name. And so you definitely can create a connection with people and you carry yourself in an awesome way. And, speaking about events and talking to people in the agency space, right? Just for context for the viewers, how many agencies would you estimate that you talk to every month? Just like, on a casual basis on Instagram versus like on calls that people jump in, like what would you say is a number so people understand? A quick break in the podcast to tell you about Stealth, my white label marketing agency. If you're an agency owner and feeling stuck in fulfillment, hiring, and team management while trying to scale, this is for you. Stealth helps agency owners like you take fulfillment off your plate so you can focus on growth of your agency, from running ad campaigns and SEO to creating high converting content and managing CRMs. We handle the back end for your clients so you don't have to. Whether you're drowning in client work or struggling to scale your agency, Stealth gives you the support you need to scale without the headache. And if that sounds like a fit, then check out our website link in the description and book a time to speak with a consultant. And now back to the pod.
So in general, on like a monthly basis, definitely hundreds of agencies that I'm talking to at any given time, between agency founder accelerator, agency closers, agency domain, which is a bunch of different companies that I'm coaching for and or own. And so yeah, definitely well over 100. And then as far as like conversations goes, probably like couple hundred agencies every single month that I'm having conversations with. I'm actively working with about 30 one-on-one at any given time. And then obviously there's like the AFA group, which is like 100 agencies in itself. So
yeah, awesome. And so, now that we have that context, that's a lot of agencies that you're speaking to over 200 agencies a month is many agencies. If you divide that by like the amount of days that we have, business days, that's like 20 agencies per day that you're talking to, and you're mostly talking to them about closing, right? About generating more sales. Now, what is the biggest mistake that you see agency owners make when it comes to sales?
Okay, so I love this topic. I think unfortunately there's a lot of sales training out there that is really great information, but not for B2B agency sales. And so the number one mistake that I see agency owners make is not so much like things that they say, but it's more about how they say it. The goal of a sales call, especially selling B2B, is not to make friends. It's not to even give value. A lot of agency owners go into sales calls thinking, I'm going to blow this person away with how smart I am and how fancy my offer is and how cool my pillars are of my pitch, when in reality, all business owners care about is working with somebody who really knows what they're doing, an expert. And so the biggest mistake that I see is people go in trying to make friends when they need to go in trying to showcase their expertise through expert level questions, challenging the prospects to make sure that they actually can help them. And it's a very different energy. It's an energy of being an authority on the call versus a friend on the call. And I think that's the number one thing that agency owners make mistakes on, and it costs them a lot of money in the process. So that's the first thing I fix when I work with agencies.
Yeah, I didn't know you would say, like, I didn't think you would say that actually. And now I'm curious to understand a bit more, because, well, for context also, I have been on a sales call with you, right? When I wanted to join AFA or go to the event, the agency founders event, right, live in Nashville in January. I did a call with you and actually you closed me, right? To the VIP package, which is the most expensive one. And I felt like super at ease in the call. It was just like a very easy process and it was fun and cool. But I'm curious to, kind of dive behind or open the curtains now and understand what frameworks like do you usually like to apply in sales calls?
Amazing. Yeah. So frameworks for me is everything in a sales process. And so if you kind of watch my content and get to know me a little bit, I talk a lot about this and it probably gets a little bit annoying at times, but I treat sales like an SOP. Just like you would have operations and SOPs in the back end when it comes to fulfillment, client management, onboarding, sales is no different. Sales is more of I got this a great quote from a friend of mine, Corey, but sales is more of a science than it is an art. And I think a lot of people treat it as this thing where it's like, oh, it's all about human connection, which it is, but we need to have a framework in place to follow so that we can create consistency. The biggest part which makes agencies successful in the sales space specifically, or closing space specifically for their agencies, is being able to close deals consistently over long periods of time. That's the difference between having a $1 million a month agency and having a $200K a month agency, is being able to close consistently over years and years and years. And so for me, what I really focus on is this concept of building a framework within your sales process, meaning everything is accounted for and happens the same way every single time. And so for me, on my calls and what I teach is I actually have like a framework that I follow on a call that covers all of the key areas that I want to know about somebody's business, at the same time covers all the potential objections. And so, for example, talking about what are you looking for in an agency? What happened with the last agency you worked with? And that gives me a really clear idea of like what they're looking for and also what they're not looking for, so that in my pitch, I can position myself as the agency that they're really needing and looking for, but also allows me to overcome any objections around what they want or don't want. And I do that around basically every aspect of any business that you're working in. So I have a framework for how I start my calls with what I say and how I say it. I have a framework for the discovery of how I ask questions, what I say, how I say it. And then I have a framework for our pitch and a framework for our objection handling. And the beautiful thing about this is it allows us to be able to actually test during sales. So for example, if you get an objection, you actually can now go back and look and go, hey, I missed this section of my framework, which is why I got that objection. I didn't dig enough into their finances and their profit margins, so this is why I'm getting a price objection. That was on me. Now my next call, I can go back and fix that, and I can go deeper in my price qualifications, which allows me to not get that objection next time. And it's this really great process so that we can actually kind of keep our own selves accountable and make adjustments on the fly instead of making the same mistake for months without realizing it because there's nobody watching your calls or keeping you accountable. So that's like the biggest focus for me is building out frameworks that are replicatable in your sales process.
Yeah, for sure. How much time would you say you spend at the beginning of the call? Well, let's start with, the traditional way of starting a sales call, building rapport, right? I'm guessing you don't build rapport at all. Like, how do you look at that? No rapport.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I love this question. So I'll say this, it depends in a sense. If you are like an Eddie Malouf, for example, where you have a lot of authority in the space, you can get away with having a little bit of rapport building because you already have that respect of the person before they even get on the call with you, right? But for 99% of agency owners and myself, people don't know who I am in the grand scheme of things, right? And so I have to make sure that I can kind of take control over a sales call as soon as possible to showcase that I have some authority, as well as to make sure that I'm preventing a prospect from taking over my call. I think all of us have been on a sales call and somebody hops in and they're like, well, this is what I'm struggling with and this is what I want. What's your price, right? And it can throw off your sales process completely. And so rapport building is what opens the door for those things to happen. And so when I say rapport building, it's like, hey, like, how's the weather? Where are you from? Oh, I've got kids too. Oh, I like your picture in the background. Like that type of conversation can create a moment in time where a prospect can come in and just take over your sales process. And so what I do is I like to put myself in the shoes of a really high level entrepreneur. If I'm making billions of dollars, I don't have time to talk about the weather, right? I need to get to the point. And so if I get on a call and I go, hey, how's your day been? And they're like, good. And I jump right into my sales process immediately, automatically they're assuming, wow, this guy's efficient. He's probably pretty busy. He's getting right to the point. This guy means business. And so it levels up my authority a little bit on the call. And so, but also It allows me to maintain control so nobody can come in and take over my sales process. And so especially new agencies, that is the most important thing. And I'm a big believer in not building rapport. Trust is built through asking incredible questions, not through talking about the weather.
Okay, great. And so no rapport building. Let's scratch that from the framework of Kurtis. And I like that. My perspective is on that is I really like it. I think once, an Eddie jumps on a call, it's like, wow, I'm talking to Eddie. Like, that's super cool. I want a bit of attention and, chit chat. But if I'm talking to somebody who I don't know and I'm already skeptical because I know that I'm in a sales call, it's like, you're just trying to build fake rapport with me. You don't really care about what I think about the weather or the game because you're just going to say whatever you want or whatever I want to hear so I could like you, right? So you're just like, you're totally a no bullshit salesperson, essentially, right? So moving on to like the next step of the call, right? Or like the first step of the call, asking really great questions, right? And you said that asking really great questions, it's like, what are the problems you've had with agencies in the past? What are you looking for, right? But fill in this area for us. Like, what are good questions to ask? What do you want to learn? And then what are good ways to ask about that?
So questions we ask is the most important part of our sales process. And what I like to do is I use this analogy of if you've ever gone to like therapy, if you've ever gone to like a counselor, right? You sit on a couch, you know nothing about this person, but they ask you such insightful questions about yourself over and over again, and you just somehow trust them, but you know nothing about them, right? That is the energy that we kind of want to bring on these sales calls, is by asking questions that make our prospects really think about, wow, this person really understands my business without us having to say anything or pitch anything, right? And so that's the goal of our discovery. But on top of that, we need to get really clear truth of what our prospects are going through. And I like to frame it that way of like, we're trying to get to our prospects' truth of what is actually happening behind the scenes. So when I'm asking questions, this is what I'm looking for. One, I want to go as deep as possible, which I'll give you an example of in a second. And then two, I want to ask questions that nobody else is asking. One of the biggest pieces of feedback that a lot of our members get, and then at Bad Marketing we get, is people before I even pitch anything go, this was the best call I've ever had. You've asked me questions that no other agency has asked before. And so a lot of it's really simple, but people are too nervous to get into that much detail. So for example, I try to know so much about a person's business that I understand their business better than they do. And so that's through a lot of questions. I ask hundreds of questions on sales calls. It's very fast paced. It's a lot we dig into. So for example, I'll go through all of your metrics, like what's your average, say I'm talking to like a painting company, and we're trying to get to the bottom of how much money they're making, right? I'm very blunt and I'll be like, cool. So I start with small questions like, what's your average quote price that you give, right? How many are you getting how many of those are you getting per month? How many would you want to be getting, right? If I give you 10 leads, how many of those are closing? And I'm asking all these questions, and those little questions lead to the big questions. Like, cool. How many jobs did you do last month? Right? Now I know how much revenue they're making because I know their average deal price. Then I'll ask them, how much money did you make last month? What was your revenue? What about the month before that and the month before that? And so a lot of people don't like going this deep because they're uncomfortable. But a lot of people will come in and say, like a prospect will say, oh, we did 500K last year. But the reality is maybe they did 200K in a single month and then they had months without any sales. That's a very different business. And so by asking these questions and going that much detail of like, how much revenue did you make this month? What about last month and the month before that? We get really clear pictures. Then I'll go into profit margins. And with contracting companies specifically, I'll give you an example where I'll be like, cool, what's your monthly profit? And they'll always say like, oh, I'm getting 40% profit. I'm making, say, whatever, 10K a month in net profit. And a lot of people will just take that at face value. But if you really understand the industry, I grew up in a family that was contractors, their profit was what they kept to pay their bills. And so what are my questions? So, hey, based on my experience, a lot of contractors will take the profit and that's what they live off of. So is the profit before or after you pay yourself? Oh, it's actually after, it's before I pay myself. So I use that 10K to live. Okay, so your business is not profitable. Like that is a very different conversation to have. And so people are like, go to the end of the call and they ask for the close and they get a price objection. They're like, I don't understand. This guy had 10K in profit. When in reality, he didn't, because that's what he's living on is the 10K. And so for me, with my questions is I want to get that deep. I want to really understand a person's business. If it's an info product, I want to understand their entire funnel. Where are leads coming from? What is the page they go through? Why is it set up this way? Why is the copy said this way? Who's coaching? How many coaches do you have? How do you pay your coaches? And this is the type of detail people don't get into. And so if you have an agency salesperson asking you how you pay your coaches, they're going to be like, damn, this person knows so much about this space. It's crazy. I can imagine that their team is really good at what they do. And so that's kind of my main focus when it comes to asking questions. Get really deep and ask really expert focused questions.
Yeah. No, and it's like you do two things about asking these questions, right? Number one is you show authority. Number two, you humble people. Because 5% of business owners may know those answers to those questions, right? It's hard. Like if you run a business, even if you're good at running a business, and you don't have like a big team, you don't have enough time to really dig into your financial numbers, and it's not to their fault, really. Like a lot of business owners sometimes are a lot more focused on making more money as opposed to like, let me dig into my metrics here and understand all of my costs. And so, generally business owners have wrong data about their profit margins, right? And it's like, if you dig a bit deeper and not take things at face value, which I'd love that you said that, it's like, oh shit, I don't actually make 40%. I make like 10, right? Yeah. And then when you can get there with them, the walls go down and you're speaking realness with each other, right? So I love that about your process. I'm actually going to change. So I'm actually taking some notes here of what I can change in my own sales process. But let's go. So you covered discovery questions, right? I think that gives a sense for people listening how they can adapt their questions in the discovery part. Let's go a bit deeper into the discovery. Are there other types of questions that you ask in terms of like, what do you want to get to? Where do what do you see yourself in 3 months, 6 months, or whatever? Like, do you get into those?
Absolutely. Yeah. So in the framework that I teach, there's a bunch of different sections, and I'll kind of cover them quickly to give you some context. So we ask like a general story of what's currently going on in the business. We'll go over their marketing and their metrics, because we're marketing agencies. So we want to understand that first and foremost. If you're a content agency, that should be one of the main subjects, is talking about content. So I cover marketing metrics, what services are they using, how is that going, how much they're spending, all of those types of things. Then I go through what their team looks like, primarily wanting to understand if they have a business partner, and if it's an equity business partner, or if their wife is doing their accounting, so that I know I'm going to need a wife objection, for example. We cover the agency. So what are you looking for in an agency? What are you not looking for in an agency? And then I'll go into goals. And so I like to do my goal question at the very end of my framework, because it allows me to kind of bring people down to earth a little bit. So I'll go into, hey, like, what's your goal for the company in this next 12 months? And they'll tell me, and I'd be like, cool, why is that your goal? What will happen when you get to that goal? And then after I paint this beautiful picture of where they're wanting to go and the vacation that they're wanting to get to, I bring them back down to earth. So where are we at right now then? And I remind them of where we're at. And it kind of creates a bit of a gap of like, I want to make 10 million this year, but you're currently at 3. And then right after that point is when I transition into the pitch, and I talk about how we're going to solve their problems and I'm going to get them to their goal. And so that's how I kind of flow through discovery, and it always kind of finishes that way. So I want to know what they're struggling with, what they want to accomplish. I want to know the good things, the bad things. And the goal of that discovery is being able to take where they're stuck in their pain, because everybody's in pain at some point. They're either in pain because they're not where they want to be yet, or they're in pain because they are losing money and the business is not in a good spot. And everybody has somewhere they want to go. And so for me, my goal is to be the bridge. I want to be the thing that takes them to where they want to go. And so that's where the pitch comes in, is when we pitch, we want to talk about their pain, how we're going to solve it, and how we're going to get them to their end goal. And so that's kind of the whole purpose of my discovery, and what I focus on is finding all those details so that I can kind of paint this big picture for them and how we're going to get them there.
Right. And then in terms of bringing them back down to earth, right? Like, and setting expectations, How do you look at that? Because setting expectations for a client is sometimes a problem in sales, right? Where we sell the dream, fulfillment has to deal with getting the results for the clients. But do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's expectation is everything. There's actually been some studies done. Don't quote me on where their studies were done, but there's been some
Somewhere
studies done
online.
somewhere this happened. But they actually did a lot of research on this concept of like what the sales team says for onboarding and how it affects clients long term and how long they stay for. And there's a lot of that shows that if you set really good expectations about what is going to be happening and those things happen after you say it, clients are actually often going to stay with you longer because there's consistency in what you say and what you do. And so, expectations wise, this is the beautiful thing about focusing on building authority instead of being somebody's friend. Is if I build a lot of authority, I can set a really realistic expectation and we can actually blow that expectation out of the water because they trust me so much. And so, believe it or not, with our process, I try to actually undersell what we're going to do. And I'll be like, listen, like it's going to take us 90 days before we're even breaking even. Like that's the reality of the situation. And if you're not comfortable with that, then this isn't going to work. And I set really hard expectations like that. So when they onboard, they're like, okay, this is great. I trust them. This is realistic. And then our team crushes on day 60 and they're like, I'm going to stay here forever. This is amazing. And so I try to be very realistic with expectations, but it only works if you have a lot of authority. Because if you're somebody's buddy and you haven't built any authority and then you say it's going to take 90 days, they're going to be like, I'm going to go find somebody that I trust more to get it done faster. And so that's kind of my take on it. And when I say expectations too, I'm very clear about like going back from what I was just saying is we want to make sure that everything we say is going to happen actually happens. If I say so-and-so is going to be reaching out to set up onboarding and that person doesn't, we're starting off a relationship me not following through with what I said. And so all these little things have to kind of fall into place. And that all starts with sales. And so I think expectations are one of the most important things to do. And you should be really clear. I have some of my clients that set expectations that you're not going to see any results for the first 90 days, like any results. And they still close a ton of people because they have so much authority and people just trust them. And they're also not trying to like, we're going to double your business in a month because people also don't trust that. And so it's this great way of building a lot of trust, but also setting your team up for success to keep people for a really long time. And then you don't have that clash of marketing and sales and fulfillment and sales because we're helping them versus setting them up for failure.
Yeah. Well, you brought up a really key point, which the expectation setting, like the harsh expectation setting, really works when you can build enough authority. That's like a key point that is missing from a lot of salespeople is that they think that if they don't set super realistic expectations, they're going to be able to close more because they can promise more. But if you build enough authority by asking a lot of questions, then you can set the realistic expectations. And then the client is going to have a better experience, right? Signing up, and it's going to feel less frustrated when they don't see results right away. So I love that you brought that up. I think that's like some savvy sauce right there for anyone listening. And then, one thing I want to touch back upon, which most people don't talk too much about. They do talk a little bit about it, like most salespeople, but it's about taking control of the sales process, right? A lot of times, a lot of times I've been walked over on sales calls, right? People jump, they're like more alpha, they're asking a lot of questions, they're trying to get to, okay, so just tell me how much do you charge? Let's get in, just give me the numbers. What do you do? What do you charge? Let's just skip the BS, right? And people in sales don't really understand the importance of taking control of the sales call, right? So shine some light on that. Like, why is taking control of a sales call important?
Absolutely. So taking control of your sales call is realistically like the first experience that your prospect's going to have with you. And so if you think about this in like a really big picture way, a lot of your prospects want agencies that are proactive, that they're going to lead, that they're going to communicate really well. And so if they hop on a sales call and the salesperson is taking full control, they're leading the entire experience, and the prospect can sit back, answer questions, and feel like they're being heard, seen, and given exactly what they're looking for, what are the expectations now they have about the agency or in the team, right? Is that they're going to do the same thing for me. They're going to be proactive. They're going to lead. They're going to be in control. That's what I'm looking for. If somebody comes in and been burnt by the last agency because they were not being proactive and they had to babysit the agency all the time, and they come onto a call with you and they could push you around in all these different directions, why would they want to work with somebody like that? Doesn't make sense. So we have to, what I say is protect our sales process at all costs. And so a couple ways we can kind of going about doing that and why this is so important is, again, it sets expectations, but it also allows us to make sure that we can follow our framework so that we can have a consistent call every single time. And so one of the biggest reasons why people fall off the framework is these types of personalities. They come in and they go, I just want to hear about the price. Like, tell me about the price. What do you guys even do? Right. And so for us, we have to protect our process. And so for me, what I like to teach is this concept of we can't back down to people like this. And it's uncomfortable, but you got to get really good at it. And that is basically stopping them in their tracks and setting an expectation of like, hey, listen, I totally get it. I'm going to answer your questions, but I can't help you or know if I can even help you until I ask these questions. And if you're not okay with me asking these questions, then we should probably just end the call here. And people are like, oh, yeah, I'm so sorry. Yeah, absolutely. Continue. Right. And now I have authority again and I'm back asking my questions. Or they get so frustrated and hurt or upset. It doesn't happen very often. This happened to me like once in the last few years. And we end the call right then and there. And I've just saved the team from having a horrible client. Right. And sometimes you have to do that 3 times on a call. And I've had to do that 3 times on a call. It doesn't happen very often if you do it the right way. But you're instilling this concept of like, hey, listen, like, you're in my house. This is my agency. This is my sales process. You don't get to do whatever you want here. And that's a part of building authority and trust, right? People want to work with people like that stand up for themselves, that have standards. But if you're not setting that on a call, then how are you showcasing that you have them? So that's like a big focus for us in our sales process.
Wow. I love that, man. And I'm also getting a lot of, things you're saying and thinking about, the content that we can make out of this, because there's some fire in here that I think is going to be super helpful to, agency owners that are selling themselves or they're managing a sales team. And speaking of a sales team and managing a sales team, one thing that you mentioned is that you should be reviewing your calls, or you should have somebody reviewing your calls, right? You don't want to keep making the same mistake over and over and over again, right? What are your thoughts into that, right? Like, what are your thoughts into, let's say, an agency owner who sells and how they review their own sales calls versus a manager that's reviewing their team sales calls? What are they supposed to look for?
So main thing that we want to look for when it comes to like watching our own sales calls, I kind of call it like game tape. If you're a professional athlete, you're watching game tape, how the game went, what you did wrong, what you need to work on, what are your competitors doing? Same thing, right? If you sit down and watch your sales call and you take a notepad out and you actually watch and you're looking at, did I have control? Did I set a clear authority at the beginning of the call? Was I asking good questions? Did I back down when they challenged me? You'll learn a lot about yourself. And so some things that I look for if I'm watching my own calls, and what you should if you're an agency owner doing the same for you, is, did I cover all of the key points of the framework and discovery, right? If not, cool. Next call, I have to make sure I hit all the key points. Did I do a good job in the pitch of talking about their pain points and how I'm going to solve their pain points? No. Okay. Next time I'm going to have to do that. Am I being robotic in my pitch? And it sounds like I'm just on an automation, just talking about something, when reality is it needs to be something that's conversational. Did I actually handle the objection, or did I let the guy go? Like, all of those things are really important. And you as an agency owner, I would argue that is the most important, because you don't have a sales manager overseeing your process. And one of the biggest issues that I see with agency owners specifically is everybody thinks that they're God's gift to sales. So the number one objection I get in my own process is, I'm already really good at sales, so I don't need any help. And reality is most agency owners are really bad at sales, but they close deals because they have conviction and they have authority, right? Which we're talking about in some cases. And so I think call reviews are the most important thing you can do. One of the feedback I get from a lot of agency owners, even if they're doing 300-400K a month, will tell me is that if somebody's watching my sales calls, it keeps me accountable to actually do the best job I can actually do. I think sometimes, we can all get a little bit lazy in our process, But having somebody watch your calls will keep you accountable to doing the best thing you could possibly do for your team and allow you to make more money, and all these different things happen. So you should absolutely be watching your call. I would suggest on a weekly basis, watch one of your calls, look for a call that didn't close but you felt should have, and try to figure out why it didn't close. And you're going to learn a lot about yourself. If you want to really level up your game, find somebody to watch your calls for you, like a sales manager would for you as an agency owner. And you're going to get a lot out of it, and you're going to be able to grow very quickly.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like it all ties back to having a really strict sales framework that you're following, right? And then just reviewing the calls and seeing if you're actually checking all the boxes, right? So that's super awesome. My sales team actually started doing that, my sales manager, by working, like learning things that you're saying, working with Rex as well inside of AFA. And it's been improving a lot, my teams, the amount that they're collecting and the close percentage. Now, speaking about the amount that my closers are collecting, right? If you're selling over and over a service that's very cheap, you're never really going to scale that much, right? As opposed to selling something that's higher ticket. What are your thoughts when it comes to, thinking about the offer itself, what you're selling? What do you usually coach agencies to do when changing their price or making their offers more expensive?
The first thing I always coach them on is asking for it. A lot of people always ask me, how do I up my prices? And I always ask them back, have you asked for it before? Have you asked for more money before? And everybody says no. And so first and foremost, you need to just start asking for more money on a consistent basis. And there's a way to go about doing that, but it's really straightforward. So I'll chat a bit about that. But it's really important that on a quarterly basis that you are testing new price points. Every single agency that I've coached in the last year, we have almost doubled their pricing. And because most of you guys are just settling on a certain price point because you're closing at that point, so you just stop there. And so for me, what I like to do is every quarter, I like to throw on, even if it's $500 a month extra on top of our retainer. And if I'm continuing to close deals consistently and my closing percentage is good, I leave it there. And then the next quarter, do it again, and I do it again. And eventually you're going to find a point where, okay, closing percentage is dipped. We've hit a price point that's probably pretty high for our market. We're going to stay there, and we're going to kind of balance it out. I'd always do that before I think about adding more adding more services or extra things to your price point. It's just asking for more money. So the best way to go about doing that is, what I like to do is I always call it like sliding down the pole. I pitch the highest price point first, no matter what, whether they can afford it or not. And I want to hear what they think about it. Right. So I'll be like, cool, it's going to be 10 grand. And they're like, oh, it's too expensive. Like, oh, why do you feel that way? Like, do you feel like this could work for you? And they're going to be like, no, it doesn't. I'd be like, cool. Well, I wouldn't suggest doing this package. I actually have this other package for you, and it's going to be 5 grand, which is reality, the actual package I want them to be on. And now 5K looks super cheap, right? I've built trust by telling them not to go with the 10K package. And I set myself up to close the same price I normally would. But the beautiful thing about this is maybe a couple out of 10 sales calls are going to take that 10K option. And now you've doubled your price point, close at a higher ticket, and your team's way more profitable, better client, all these things start to roll out. And so that's kind of how I approach it when it comes to upping price. And you should always have different staggered price points at all times that you're testing.
Right, for sure. So we're looking, so far we've talked a lot about the individual closer, right? And so how do we improve, their closing rate? How do we improve the amount of like the average order value, right? The average ticket value. Now, when an agency can get to closing like a high retainer and with good conversion rates, right? How should they think about increasing the volume of deals that they're closing every month, right? Because if you can close 20 deals at 5K a month, right? You're just closing one every day. That's awesome. You're bringing in $100,000, right? Or something like that, $100,000. Now, what if you're an agency owner that wants more and you're like, instead of just 100K, I want 200K, right? How do you look at that in terms of growing the amount of new revenue you're collecting?
So two different ways you can go about doing it. You can up your price to get to that 200K, which is honestly the easiest way to do it. And so for me, that's my lowest hanging fruit. If I can double your retainer and you close at the same closing percentage, we've doubled your agency size. Now, if that's not an option, and maybe you've hit the top of the market of price point, and you've tested it and you can't get any higher than that, then it becomes a numbers game. And so what I mean by that is if you have a sales team and you know if they take 100 calls and they're going to close 40 of those 100 calls, and that's been consistent for the last quarter, we need more calls, right? And so now it becomes a marketing game where how do we bring in more calls and take that 100 calls to 200 calls? And if the team stays consistent at 200 calls or at that same closing percentage, we've now doubled the amount of cash collected. But a lot of people go wrong with that because they don't actually realize there's certain problems within their sales process and they think they just need more leads when in reality they don't. So what I would do is make sure your sales team is constantly learning and leveling up their ability and their skill. That is the first thing that's going to allow you to be able to collect more cash, is them just getting better. And then if they're all optimized, they're learning, they're really great, they're constantly getting better on the skill side, and they are consistent when it comes to numbers, that's a really great time to be able to up ad spend or up volume, whatever that might be. So it's kind of those three different aspects: up your price, level up your skill, and then also increase volume.
Cool. So let's talk about increasing volume, okay? Because like 1 and 2, I feel like we've covered and people like got a sense of it. If you didn't get a sense of how to do steps 1 and 2, go back a few minutes. You're gonna get it. Put our transcript into our into ChatGPT and say, break it down for me. But let's go into the step 3. Okay, you've organized your sales team, right? Healthy metrics. You've kind of hit a ceiling on the amount of retainer that you can collect based on testing that higher retainer. You are able to generate more leads through marketing, but people have only so much time, right? If like a salesperson can only take 5 sales calls or 7 sales calls per day, who can take the other sales calls? How do you go about increasing the size of the sales team?
Yeah. So if your team is currently at capacity where everybody has a full calendar, something that I look for is if we're starting to have to book out meetings like a week in advance and everybody's full on calendar, it's a really good sign that you should have gotten a closer already, basically. And so ideally you're in a place where as you have all these numbers lined up and you've increased volume, that you're kind of bring on closers as you're ready for it, so that you don't have. One of the things I always want to prevent is having a bunch of closers making not enough money, right? And so once we've optimized the current sales team and we now have too much volume, that's when you should be looking at bringing on another closer. And so that's kind of the things I primarily focus on. And another way to go about doing that is having more efficiency with the meetings that your current closers are taking. And so that would be maybe a setter you could bring in to make sure they're qualifying people harder on the front end so that your closers are only talking to really, really qualified people. That's another quick way to be able to increase volume by decreasing the amount of calls your sales are on at the same time, if that makes sense. So there's kind of the two different things I look at. And when it comes to bringing on a sales rep, what I would do is always be hiring. You always want to be looking for top talent. If somebody, an A player comes in and let me rephrase that. If an A player comes in, you can always find something for them to do, right? But if you're not always looking and not only always hiring, you're not going to have those A players randomly come to you. And so if you're a sales manager, if you're an agency owner with a sales team, you should always be looking for good talent. Worst case scenario, you just don't hire them. But it's really important that if you do need to bring on a closer, that you have somebody lined up for you so you can act quickly. Even like I place a lot of closers as a service, and it takes us like 3 to 4 weeks to get a really, really good experienced closer. So if you need somebody now and you needed one like yesterday, you're going to still have to wait another 4 weeks, and it's a lot of money could be lost on the table. So be proactive and make sure you have a list of people that you can bring on to be closed and ready to train. Those are kind of a couple different things that I'd suggest.
Cool. When you think about top talent as a salesperson, what do you look for?
First and foremost for me is kind of going off what we've already talked about is I look for expertise first. I can teach sales. I can't teach expertise as efficiently, right? For you, you know marketing inside and out. You know agency space inside and out. That's something that's hard to teach because you've been doing it for so long. And so what I do is I look for somebody that really understands my industry that I'm in, not my client's industry, right? If I'm selling to painters, I don't want to find a painter to sell for me. I want to find somebody that really understands marketing because then they're going to be the expert on the call. So first and foremost, do they have expertise in what they're selling? Marketing services, content service, whatever that might be. After that, I want to look for characteristics of somebody that's very coachable. So if I give you advice, are you actually going to take it and make change? If you are, I can work with that person. And I can teach that person because they're going to grow very quickly. If somebody's an expert but is not willing to grow, get rid of them as soon as possible because you're going to have a really stagnant team and it's not going to be fun. So those are the two things I look for: expertise in my industry, and then are you coachable? And a lot of the other things can kind of fall into place after that because they can be trained on sales skill and process. They can follow the framework because they're coachable and they really understand the niche that I'm in. So it's going to be really easy for them to have expert level questions or expert levels conversations on sales calls.
How do you know if someone is coachable?
So great question. In our interview process, and I highly suggest that you do this, the first interview is always just kind of Q&A. What is your experience? What do you do? Why do you want to do this? Why did you apply for our services? All those different things, our job position. The second call is a role play. And so what I suggest doing this is have the first role play, have them just go off of what their normal process is. After the role play is done, give them some feedback and do it again. And if they don't implement the feedback that you've just given them, it's a really good sign that they're not coachable.
Man, if people are not coachable, like, get rid of them fast, because it's the hardest thing to work with is people that don't listen what you say.
100%. It's brutal.
I love that. I feel like that's a really practical way that people can go about, validating if people are coachable or not. Now, going back to, speaking about top talent, right? We covered how we can identify top talent. Now, how can you find top talent? Because first you got to talk to people, and then you can do what we just talked about, is identifying if they're a top talent. But where do you go to find closers?
When it comes to me searching for closers, now obviously for me, I have a really big private list of closers. My business partner in agency closers is Eddie Malouf. So there's been hundreds of people that have applied to Bad Marketing. And so we have a lot of really top talent coming from that ecosystem. So I always go to my own private list first. But if you're starting from scratch, my suggestions are, first, go to social media. You'll be shocked how powerful a story post is. Looking for a closer. This is the average earnings. Know anybody? I'll give you $500 if you bring somebody good to me. And you'll be surprised how many interviews you can set up just from one Instagram post, even if you have a few hundred followers, right? Everybody has friends. Next, go to your community, right? A lot of people in Agency Founder Accelerator, hey, I'm looking for a closer. I'm looking for a media buyer. A lot of other agency owners also have top talent that they maybe can't keep, and they're willing to pass on to you because they want to help and they want to help the person. So it's a really great way to find good talent quickly. Another third option, which I don't like, it's a lot of work, but it works, is go into sales communities, Facebook groups, school communities, make posts in those communities looking for closers, directly DM them, and you can get a lot of interviews set up that way. And I would suggest kind of always having your foot in the door with all these communities so that at any given time, if somebody's looking for a closer or a new role, you can jump in there and interview them. And then lastly, placement services. And so, for example, something that I offer is that you can come to me and I'll place a closer into your business that has experience in your specific niche, ideally. And that's a really quick way of kind of skipping all the first three steps because that person's already done it for you. The tricky part with placement, though, is you just have to make sure that who you're working with is specialized in your industry. Because you don't want to hire like an info or car salesman if you're trying to sell marketing services because they've never sold B2B before like that. So you got to be careful of who's placing the closers for you, but that would be kind of the order of priority I would suggest going in. Private lists first, your communities that you trust, open communities like sales communities, and then go to a placement service.
Yeah. So if, an agency owner decided to go and search for closers themselves, right? They feel confident in their approach of finding closers, identifying who they want to work with. Maybe they want to, just do it fast or think they're going to save money by finding the closers themselves. What are the main mistakes that these agency owners are making when hiring closers themselves?
A big mistake agency owners make when it comes to bringing on high-level talent is they don't have clear expectations laid out of what's going to be possible working for them. Unfortunately, this is really bad in the space. A lot of people are overselling their offer. Oh, I have a full calendar for you. We have unlimited leads. Come work for me and you're going to make all this money. When the reality is maybe your agency doesn't have the ability to feed a top level closer, right? And so that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see is people overpromise and then they lose closers really fast because they can't deliver their promises. So I always approach it in this way: is you want to make sure that when you're reaching out to an A plus, like an A level closer, that you have a really compelling commission structure for them. Closers are here to make money. That's their goal, right? And so if you want to have and attract somebody that's really, really good, they want to make a lot of money. So when you go to approach them, make sure you have a competitive compensation structure, high percentage for commissions, ongoing commissions that are reoccurring, for example, depending on your services. And if you do that really well, where you can pitch your culture well, and you have a competitive pricing structure to pay your closers, you're going to be able to get a lot of people in the door, not quickly, but efficiently that way.
Yeah. But man, you said a lot of like really sophisticated things, right? If I'm a new agency owner and I'm thinking about creating a payment structure or a commission structure, like where do I go for that? I don't think we can even cover that in this podcast. But when it comes to structuring all of that, let's kind of skip all of that. What if I want to work with you? Right. I've been watching, like I'm a viewer watching this podcast right now. I like you, Kurtis. Like, how can you help my agency in terms of compensation structure? Or how can you help my agency in terms of giving me closers and placing a closer inside of my agency?
So I work with agencies in a few different capacities, kind of two parts of what we do at Agency Closers particular. Half of what I do is working with agency owners and closers on their sales process. So call reviews, weekly one-on-one coaching calls. I give SOPs and frameworks, and everything that I teach is kind of available to my members and that side of things. The other 50% is closer and setter placement. And so for me, what I do is if you come to our ecosystem looking for a closer, a big part of that is me making sure that when I'm going to find talent, that I can help create that compelling offer and that compensation structure. So that's one thing I would help with is what is your closing percentage or your commission percentages that you're going to be giving? Is that good enough? It's not good enough. I'm going to help you structure this so that it can attract some more talent. And then I can go out and go to my private list that I've already talked about and bring in some really great experienced closers that are looking for awesome offers. And I can place them into a company set up for success where I can set the right expectations. I can help the agency owner on what they need to have in place for proper systems, proper management, proper offer structure. So my goal is to be able to always help people in both sides, whether it's, hey, if you're not ready for a closer yet, you should probably get better at closing yourself first. So let's set up your systems. Let's set up your framework. Let's get you dialed in. Let's record all of this so that when you bring on a closer, they have a proper system in place for them to be able to grow and be successful. A really big issue that we see in the space is agency owners bring on closers and they've never managed a sales team before. So it's like blind leading the blind, and they wonder why it never works. And so you have to have your systems dialed first before it makes any sense to bring on somebody. So my goal is to be able to help closers and agency owners at all stages of that, whether it's them getting better themselves or them bringing on top talent and managing that top talent.
Okay. And so just to make it really clear, I did understand what you just said, right? But it's really clear. It should be really clear for agency owners watching this that you do work with all stages of an agency owner, right? If they're ready to bring a closer or if they're not ready to bring a closer, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So for me, just to give you context, for me, what I'm looking for when I work with an agency is if you're getting at least around 8 to 10 demos a month that are qualified, I can help you. I can help you close more deals, up your pricing, have a better structure in place, up a framework. And then if you are at capacity and you truly are needing a closer, then I can help you place that closer into your business, or I can do both, right? Some of my clients will come to me closing themselves at like 5, 10K a month in cash collected. We get them to like 30, 40K cash collected, and then we bring on a closer and replace them. And then I train their closer for them as time goes on. So kind of depending on the agency needs, but from agencies doing 30K a month to 2 million a month, I've worked with kind of everything in between.
Yeah. And, I'm not like pitching you to my audience right now. But I, just from being in the space for over 3 years, right, and doing it all myself, I have learned a couple lessons, right, and one of them is that I actually pay for coaching, right? I paid AFA, right, to join the program of 1 year. It's been super valuable, right? I've also paid other coaches in the past that have helped me in the beginning, but I do wish that I had bought coaching programs that are very specific to exactly what I need to get done, right? I do wish that I had done that in the past, especially coaching programs where somebody is going to work very closely to me and guide me. Because sometimes when you buy a program, no matter how great the program is, if you don't make use out of it, if you don't go in, ask questions, you won't get any value out of it. But if you're paying someone that's getting you from point A to point B by working closely with you, which I think is what you do in a way, it's totally different because you're going to handhold a lot more, right, and help them get to the results that they're looking for. So now that we have that as a context, I would love to encourage people to get in touch with you if they're trying to build out, to grow, right? If they're trying to grow their agencies from like the 30K mark, right? You're not obviously going to work with anyone if you haven't sold any deals, if you don't even have a niche, if you don't know how to book appointments. Go back a step, right? But if you're already closing meetings, you're doing above 30K, then I think working with Kurtis is going to grow your company so much faster. Kurtis is somebody that I follow very closely. And now, let's talk about a bit of case studies, right? Before we jump into the next set of questions. Share with us a bit about some of the latest agency owners that grew from X to Y by working with you.
Yeah, some of my favorites are actually more on like a mindset standpoint. I think the biggest thing is being able to break through people's beliefs. And so one of my favorite parts of working with a lot of entrepreneurs is being able to kind of help them open up their eyes of what's actually possible. And I think that's like my favorite part of what I do. When it comes to some like metric questions, or not metric questions, but examples, we had an agency owner that is in the contractor space. They joined actually 2 weeks ago. And in the last 2 weeks, we've taken their price point from $1,900 to $2,800. And they have increased their close rate. And they've actually, in the first week of May, have increased their cash collected by 63%. So just from a few tweaks, the framework implemented and increasing pricing right out of the gate, nothing else has changed. Marketing stays the same. So those are kind of some of my favorite case studies, and that's quite consistent. We had an agency recently triple in size in about a 90-day window. We upped their pricing. We went from a paid in full option for like a 90-day build out, and we turned it into a monthly option. So they were charging $3,000 for a 90-day build out of your ads and email and all these different things through Go High Level. And we optimized it and changed their offer to $3,500 per month instead. And so in a 90-day window, they tripled their agency revenue just from that couple small changes. Yeah, didn't change anything else.
Tripling your agency revenue. You speak about these things so nonchalantly. Let's put a pause there. It's not easy to triple in 3 months, but if you do make the right changes, you can, right? And that's super true. My agency, for example, is closing about 36 deals a month, right? And by adding contracts, for example, we didn't used to add contracts. Now we do have a 30-day notice. Immediately, that adds another month of revenue. If you're closing 36 deals, you add one more month. That's a lot of cash, right? Mm-hmm. So it depends on what volume you're at, but if you make really small changes, you can make huge differences in your business, right? I mean, I was talking about with an agency owner that works with CRO, right? Conversion rate optimization. Dude, 1% in your conversion on your website could make like $3 million for your client,
It's massive.
right? And so one change in your pricing, one change in your offer, one change in your contract can triple the size of your agency in 3 months. And so when it comes to like running a business, knowledge is really the key to scale. But it's not only knowledge, it's actually applying the knowledge, right? And so working with someone closely that you can take that knowledge, you can have some follow-up to see how you're applying it, how you're testing it, pivoting a bit. That's going to make all of the changes. And that's some truth. That's some truth. You know, I'm not pitching Kurtis, but I'm just trying to help agency owners find resources where they can actually scale. I put my like money where my mouth is. I'm buying programs because I obviously believe in it. And so, you know, that's one of the reasons I feel like I've been able to grow. And that's what I want to encourage agency owners here to do themselves. Now, thank you for that, Curtis. Let's transition a bit in terms of questions here. If you don't mind, we're going to do some rapid fire questions now. And you can just answer whatever comes to mind. And what's the most impactful software or tool that you use to run your agency or your teams?
So I'll give you a bit of an unexpected one. Actually, it's using Blue tech software is really big. So whether it's High Blue, Send Blue, we've done a lot of tests on this. And if you use an iPhone with your sales team, Blue text messages get a 40 to 70% higher response rate. And so we've done this for 3 years. We realized this 3 years ago in bad marketing, and he got us all iPhones the same day. And it's drastically changed our ability to get people on the phone. And so implementing either physical iPhones to use iMessages or getting those softwares, I suggest like High Blue's really great team. Then that's probably my favorite software right now.
That's some fire sauce right there. Nobody's answering green text messages, right?
It's sad, but it's true.
How many niches do you guys work with?
I can confidently say probably all of them. Painting, car dealerships, gutter companies, AI, ops, agency services, info services, e-com services, like everything. I'm like actively working with all of those niches right now.
What would you say is a good CPL for book calls for a closer if you're running ads?
That's a tough one. I honestly am not the best person to answer that. It's so dependent on the offer. I've got for example, I've got clients that are acquiring customers at $3,000 for $400 running ads, which is like ridiculous. But I also have clients that are breaking even. So it's like so dependent on niche and business. E-com space, it's competitive. You're going to have really high costs. So it kind of just depends on the niche. So it's hard to kind of give you an average there.
Yeah. That is pretty hard. But I would say like if your CAC is breaking even or better, that's probably a good measure, right?
Yeah. A quick thing I'll throw in. I got this from Eddie. Eddie Malouf at Bad Marketing. His like main ethos when it comes to running ads is if the sales team is breaking even on ad spend, he will spend unlimited amounts of money because we can keep people a long time on the back end through retainers. So as long as we're breaking even on the front end, he will continue to up ad spend. So I think that's a really good focus for a lot of agencies to have is if it's reoccurring, of course, and you've got a good service, just focus on breaking even ideally or better.
Yeah. Can you share with us one unique tactic that you've used to acquire clients?
So I use something called a social funnel, and this works really well for me. I get majority of my clients in AC from this. So I have a very intentional funnel on my social media. And so I use Instagram as kind of like my main website, as you could call it. I try to push people into long form content from my Instagram page. They'll watch like a lot of my YouTube content. It's not good content, but they watch it and they'll, I shouldn't say that it's not high quality content, but it's good content. And so they watch my long form and they get to know me really well. And all of my YouTube videos push people into DMing me on Instagram. And so I kind of have this like little funnel that I've built through making short form, pushing to long form, pushing to DMs on Instagram. It creates a lot of great conversation. My average watch time on YouTube is about 10 hours. So people get to know me very well through YouTube videos. And then when they come to me, they're really trusted. So believe it or not, in AC, I've only taken, in the last 12 months, I've taken 4 sales calls. All of my clients have come through DM sales for my services because they have a
Wow.
lot of trust. So that's my little focus when it comes to acquiring new customers right now.
Dude, that's huge. I would have never thought that you're closing the majority of deals through DMs.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Ew. That's awesome. So next question, that threw me off.
It's funny. It's actually funny because people come in like being like they're going to learn sales. They're expecting me to close them. And I'm like, I do not push at all for my services. If you want to come work with me, come work with me. That's it. But yeah, majority of revenues all come from DM sales. And I hope to continue that way. It's going to set up the lifestyle that I want. So
Cool. And so if you could automate any part of your business or of your, day-to-day work, what would it be?
if I could, I think content. I just like, I think in my ideal world, somebody would manage my Instagram for me and I don't have to even think about it. I don't like being on social media. I don't like editing content. So I think that was probably my like first thing I'd automate, is the social media side of things.
Dude, that you could automate that. You could hire a social media analyst and do it.
Probably. Yeah. But I love being in the DMs. That's where I can offer a lot of value. And I also get a lot of my sales from Instagram DMs. So like, I have a hard time handing that off. Maybe that's just a limited belief, but
Yeah.
yeah.
That's something to explore. I feel like you could do some things maybe on the content side. An analyst can do all of the posting. On the inbound, you take over. But if you had to only focus on one marketing channel for growth, what would it be?
YouTube.
YouTube ads?
Yeah.
YouTube
No,
ads
just
or YouTube organic?
YouTube. Organic
Okay.
YouTube. Yeah. So at Bad Marketing, we've gotten all of our biggest clients from Eddie's YouTube channel. He's actually stopped traveling as much to focus on more YouTube because we're getting such high quality leads. It's not a lot high volume, but like ClickFunnels as a client came from a YouTube video,
Wow.
not from ads. So highest leverage, in my opinion, if you're a business owner, should be making long form content because you can build so much trust and authority. And if you look at Eddie's content, it's just all him on stage and he just posts his podcasts he's on, his presentations he gives a ton of authority and value, and it funnels a lot of really successful businesses into the ecosystem. So YouTube's probably my main suggestion there. It's long, but it works.
Yeah. Which marketing trend do you think is overrated?
Marketing. I think I'm going to get heat for this. I think the whole AI tool, like used AI as a marketing trend, I think it's just getting a little bit old. Everybody has AI and everything. I know there's a lot of value in AI. I don't doubt that whatsoever, but like I'm seeing so many agencies just throw AI on the end of their offer just because. And so maybe that's not really like a marketing channel or anything like that, but I feel like that's something that I've noticed. Probably gonna get some heat for that.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that you're real. If you had, so in terms of revenue, right? Like, I guess you're head of sales, so I don't even know how to do this, but you have agency closers. But one of the questions I ask my guests is, what's your current revenue, and how are you initially funded?
Yeah, so I'll give both. I think it's pretty open as far as where Bad Marketing is. I'll just say like roughly they're doing a couple mil a month at Bad Marketing between all the different things that are going on there. And that's been pretty consistent for the last couple of years. And then at agency closers I focus primarily on profit. For me with agency closers, my goal is to build a business that really serves me and the people I work with and not really build this like massive beast. So right now I'm sitting around like 45K in profit every single month. And so that's kind of my main needle, like my main goalpost that I focus on is profit margin.
Nice. I love that. People are not talking about profit margin. You are. What's the size of your team, and how do you approach hiring? Or what's the size of your team? We already talked about approaching hiring.
Yeah, approaching hiring. So,
size of your team.
So size of my team, at Bad, we have about 200 employees as of right now across the entire organization. At Agency Closers, I have a sales director that assists me. I have a EA that basically runs my life for me, and that's it. So it's just the three of us that run the business. It's kind of my team structure right now.
Cool. What's your biggest bottleneck today?
For me, I think my biggest bottleneck is systems, and having the time to develop really strong systems for my community, for my members. I think a lot of the time I can get caught up in building and marketing and sales and not enough time on building like a really strong back end system. And so that's probably my biggest bottleneck right now.
All right. Well, Curtis, last question for you. Okay. This is something everybody wants to know. When are you buying your next car?
Oh man, I totally caught me off guard. Who'd you talk to? No. I'm working on it.
I've been looking at your Instagram stories, dude. I've been reading. I've been paying attention. I've been studying.
He studied. Yeah, it's definitely going to happen very soon. I was about to pull the trigger on it, and I decided I want to wait until we buy our next home, so I have like a proper garage. Because right now it would be just sitting out in the rain, and I don't want that. So hopefully, going to be buying a property in the next 6 months here, and then I'm going to buy the car.
All right, there you have it. Well, Curtis, this has been a masterclass for agency owners trying to sell more, scale smarter. And for everyone listening, if you're serious about leveling up your sales game, rewind this episode, go back, take your time, study up, and if you are coachable, you're going to have some results. Curtis, where can people connect with you?
Instagram is probably the best place. So it's Kurt at Kurt Anderton on Instagram.
All right, cool. Well, I linked that in the show notes as well as in the description below. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been super valuable, so I really appreciate. And I'll see you everyone in the next podcast.